My name is Sabrina Holloway, and I hit the floor right in front of everyone on Christmas Eve, the mashed potatoes sliding across the table and smearing over my sweater. My side throbbed sharply where my stepbrother, Zane, had shoved me out from under the old wall clock. That seat is for my dad. Get out, he snapped, his voice sharp, leaving no room for discussion. Time froze for a moment. Forks hung midair, eyes flicked, and for a heartbeat, it felt like the whole world was holding its breath. I looked up at Zane's smug half-smile, expecting Mom to say something, anything, to protect me. She didn't. She simply turned away, fussing over the mess instead of the person lying in it. That was the moment something inside me went dark. Not a fiery rage, but a quiet, cold certainty that something had broken permanently. Lansing, Michigan, is where I grew up. Winters so sharp they cut through coats, quiet streets lined with modest homes, a life shaped by simple routines and steady work. I'm 34 now, and I've always lived by a few straightforward rules: show up, keep your word, manage your own responsibilities. Reputation matters more than anything. That spot under the clock mattered because it was sacred. Every holiday, family photos were taken right there, beneath the wall clock my dad had left me when he passed away when I was 12. I'd polished it, kept it straight on the dining room wall at my mom's house, treating it like a tether to him. For years, it had been my anchor. That night, that anchor broke. I pushed myself up slowly, ignoring the flare of pain in my side, and walked out into the bitter Michigan cold without a word. Sitting in my car, engine running, snow crunching under the tires, I watched the house lights flicker behind me. A choice had already been made. One that would change everything. If any of this hits close to home, feeling like an outsider at your own family's table or realizing your generosity has been mistaken for weakness, I want you to know you're not alone. Stick with this story, it's raw, real, and for anyone who's ever been overlooked. The drive back to my small apartment on the east side of town was tense, each bump in the frozen streets a reminder of the pain in my side. I turned off the radio, no Christmas songs tonight to mock me, and kept the heater on full blast. Lansing had always been home. Quiet suburbs, neighbors waving from their driveways, Friday nights spent at the corner pub talking high school football with a beer in hand, the same games people remembered for decades. Life was simple, predictable, comfortable, safe. I worked as an accountant at a mid-sized firm downtown, my paycheck steady, benefits reliable, bills paid ahead of schedule, a modest emergency fund in place. I had learned early to live cautiously. Dad, Thomas Holloway, had fought a long illness that left the family with medical debt. Mom had done her best, but life shifted when she remarried Michael Larson, bringing his son Zane into our lives. I had tried to blend seamlessly, taking small steps to make everyone feel at home. About 3 years before that Christmas Eve, I had decided to use a substantial portion of my savings, the money I'd scrimped for a decade, driving the same old sedan, skipping vacations or big purchases, to remodel the dining room at Mom's house. The old linoleum floor was peeling, the walls a dull yellow that made the room feel claustrophobic. I found contractors online, compared quotes, and chose a local crew with solid reviews. Oak hardwood replaced the linoleum, walls were painted a soft cream, pendant lights cast a warm glow, and new trim polished off the transformation. Nothing flashy. Just quality, something that could finally make the house feel like home. Mom cried the day it was finished. She wandered from corner to corner, fingers grazing the surfaces, tears slipping freely. Now we can actually have people over without feeling ashamed, she said, hugging me tightly. I believed her. I believed we were building a space for family, for memories, for a sense of belonging. I handled all the contracts and payments myself. Mom suggested it, saying, "You deal with numbers every day, Sabrina. Better if you manage this." I didn't hesitate. Deposits came from my checking account, inspections scheduled, crew paid on time. Reimbursements trickled in over months, and I didn't mind. It felt like investing in a family, in a sense of belonging I'd always wanted. Zane never contributed. He floated through short-term jobs, warehouses, delivery gigs, construction stints that fizzled quickly. Mom always smoothed over the chaos he left behind. He was going through a rough patch, she'd explain whenever I pointed out bills left unpaid, messes left behind, promises broken. The clock remained in the center of the dining room, wrapped carefully during the renovation, rehung proudly after. Winding it and polishing it became my ritual, my link to Dad in a room I'd helped restore. That night in my apartment, staring at a blank wall where someday I might hang something of my own, the remodel felt less like generosity and more like dues paid for a place I'd never truly had. The dining room looked perfect, the table polished and ready, but the people around it still treated me as an outsider. Sitting in my dimly lit apartment, the quiet pressing down, the events replayed like broken film. Zane had always carried an edge, built from his restlessness and brashness. Broad-shouldered, quick, moving like he wanted to be noticed. Jobs came and went. Mom's indulgence reinforced the dynamic. "Pick your battles," she would say, "he's had it harder." I complied, believing compromise earned acceptance. Christmas Eve had started like any other. Relatives arrived steadily, kids running, adults talking, the smells of baked ham and spiced cider filling the house. Zane showed up late, boots thudding against the mat, drawing eyes. Dinner unfolded, laughter rising and falling, conversations polite but strained. I helped wherever I could, refilling glasses, clearing plates, trying to find a foothold in the rhythm of the gathering. When it came time for the annual family photo, everyone lined up beneath the clock. Kids in the front, adults behind, the camera poised to capture our tradition. I moved into my usual spot near the center. Zane shifted abruptly, deliberately bumping me aside. "This is for my dad's real family," he said, stepping into the frame. I stumbled, my hip slammed against the table edge, dishes rattling, gravy spilling across my sweater. I hit the floor, breath stolen from me. The room froze. A gasp from a child, then silence. No one moved to help. The clock ticked above, steady and indifferent. I pushed myself up, brushed off the mess, and walked out into the cold night without a word. Snow whipped around me, each breath burning, but I made it to my car. Tires crunched on the frozen streets as I drove back to my apartment. My phone buzzed incessantly. "Mom, Zane, Mom again." I ignored them. By the time I parked, snow had already started accumulating on the windshield. Inside, I set down my bag, let the quiet settle, and tried to make sense of it all. The calm of my apartment contrasted sharply with the chaos that had unfolded at the family table. Morning came slow, sunlight slanting through half-closed blinds, cutting across my living room in pale streaks. My head throbbed from the awkward sleep on the couch, body stiff from the previous night's fall, side still sore where Zane had shoved me. The apartment was cold. The radiator hadn't kicked in fully yet, and the quiet felt heavier than usual. I reached for my phone, intending to check work messages before heading into the office, and that's when I saw it, a push alert from my credit monitoring service. "Alert, new account opened in your name." My stomach dropped. I tapped the notification, and the app loaded slowly. There it was, a new personal loan, $22,000, approved and disbursed, with me listed as co-signer. The lender was the same community credit union I'd banked with since college. My heart picked up, palms damp. The origination date was recent. Someone had used my identity without permission. The purpose was listed as an auto purchase, a truck, likely for Zane. The signatures on the documents resembled mine, but the curves and pressure were off, inconsistent. Anyone who'd watched me sign checks over the years could have pulled this off, thinking I wouldn't notice. Coffee forgotten, I opened my laptop and logged into the full credit report portal. Hard inquiries had already hit my credit score, utilization ratio spiked. My careful work, the years spent paying off cards in full, never missing a due date, maintaining a solid credit history, it was all at risk now. My mind raced. I grabbed the phone and called the credit union's direct line for member concerns. Sarah answered, calm and professional, mid-40s voice steady. After verifying my information, I asked her to pull the loan file. She confirmed the primary borrowers were Elaine Larson, my mom, and Zane, funds released for a truck registered in his name. Supporting documents included a joint account history I'd shared years ago and a signature page that, while close, had inconsistencies Sarah flagged as suspicious. She explained the immediate consequences: credit inquiries could block future approvals, debt-to-income ratios impacted, missed payments could devastate my score. She instructed me to come in with originals and file a fraud affidavit. The betrayal felt concrete now. Every statement I'd shared with Mom after Dad passed, every time I helped Zane, money for bills, gas, tools, deposits, they had all become tools to manipulate my credit and security. I dressed quickly, bundled in jeans, sweater, and boots, grabbed the fraud documents, and drove downtown. Snow slush hissed under tires, the roads quiet in the post-holiday calm. The investigator at the credit union was methodical, older man, calm, notebook open. We reviewed timelines, access to my information over the years, and signed fresh signature samples to compare with the loan application. Every detail, measured, precise. Sarah prepared the affidavit, sworn statements, and dispute letters. I signed steadily. Protection was in place. The weight on my shoulders began to lift, just slightly, the first time I felt some control in weeks. After finishing at the credit union, I drove back to Mom's house. Snow still clung to branches, roads wet and slick. I carried the folder like quiet evidence, each page a record of betrayal and my determination to protect myself. The door opened, Mom's surprise evident. "Sabrina, you're here early. Come inside, it's cold." Zane lounged in the living room, mug in hand, TV low. He muted it when I entered, posture immediately defensive. "What's this about?" he asked, already tense. I stayed standing near the entry. "The $22,000 loan for your truck. My name is on it as co-signer. I just came from the credit union." Mom stepped softly between us. "Let's sit and talk. Maybe it's a mix-up." "No mix-up," I said firmly, pulling out my phone and opening the video from the doorbell camera I'd saved. Zane's voice filled the room, casual and dismissive, talking with Mom about handling the loan. Their quiet agreement confirmed everything I'd feared. No one had asked for my permission. Zane tried to brush it off. "You're overreacting as usual. We've borrowed small things before, and it worked out." Mom's eyes welled with tears. "We never meant harm. We were just trying to get him stable. I thought you'd understand." I kept my voice even. "The big deal is my credit. My future. Used without permission." The tension in the room thickened. Zane crossed his arms, face flushed. "Family helps family. You make good money. No kids draining it. What's the big deal?" I turned toward the door. "No more justifying. No more absorbing." Mom's voice rose. "Where are you going?" "To finish what needs doing," I said, leaving without another word. The drive back downtown was direct, radio off again. At the credit union, I met the investigator once more. We went through the formalities, providing additional bank statements, clarifying timelines, confirming handwriting comparisons. Multiple signature samples, slow and fast, to show natural variation, were compared to the loan documents. Each deviation noted, each inconsistency marked. I signed the final affidavits, the reporting freeze for the bureau confirmed. My future was secured. Weeks passed in a series of precise, deliberate steps, emails, calls, and document exchanges with the investigator. I responded quickly, building the case without emotion, laying facts carefully. Soon, the hearing notice arrived from the 55th District Court in downtown Lansing. I prepared calmly, printing extra copies of every document, dressing in simple professional attire. Arriving early, I found parking near the older brick building that housed civil and misdemeanor matters. The smell of floor polish and coffee drifted from a vending machine in the hallway. The courtroom was functional, beige walls, worn wooden benches, fluorescent lights humming. I took a seat in the gallery, noting the cycle of other cases, traffic disputes, landlord issues, small claims. When our case was called, I stepped forward. Mom and Zane were already there, opposite side, accompanied by a court-appointed attorney. Mom wore a plain sweater, hair tied back, hands clasped. Zane sat rigid, jaw tight, avoiding my gaze. Ms. Reynolds, the prosecutor, outlined the complaint calmly, projecting documents onto the screen, the loan application, identification copies, the forged signature page. Side-by-side comparisons highlighted inconsistencies obvious even to untrained eyes. Audio from the doorbell camera played, Zane's voice casual, assuming I would handle the consequences. Mom testified, voice trembling, confirming her role in supporting Zane. She hadn't spoken with me directly, only assumed I'd agree. Questions followed. She admitted no explicit discussion had occurred. Zane claimed informal support, citing prior small loans. She always had the good job, he said. His attorney attempted to frame it as misunderstanding. The questions revealed the premeditation and lack of communication. The audio reinforced the point. Relatives filled the gallery, expressions ranging from discomfort to silent disapproval. The judge, late 50s, silver-streaked hair, direct gaze, listened without interruption, reviewing exhibits during recess. When she returned, her ruling was clear. Fraud had occurred, restitution required, the full $22,000 plus interest and fees to be repaid through the court. Zane was to liquidate the truck within 30 days, any deficiency split. Mom needed certified financial responsibility training. Probation included no further access to my financial information. As the gavel fell, Mom's tearful plea reached me. Zane muttered under his breath. I walked past, folder in hand, relief washing over me. Structure had replaced chaos. Justice wasn't a spectacle, it was the framework I needed to protect myself and move forward. The weeks after the court hearing passed quietly, the rhythm of Lansing life returning slowly. Snow melted into slush, then into the brown-gray of early spring along the Grand River trails. I walked there often, letting the crisp air carry away remnants of tension, the quiet of the river contrasting sharply with the chaos that had defined the past months. At the accounting firm, work remained steady. Client meetings, tax deadlines, reconciliations, they grounded me. My apartment became more my own each day. I added small touches, bookshelves lined with novels and reference guides, potted plants by the window, a soft throw over the couch. Even the evenings alone felt chosen, not lonely. Peace was deliberate, hard-earned. News of the fallout from the court case trickled in second-hand, filtered through gossip rather than direct contact. Zane struggled visibly. Every job application turned into rejection after rejection. Background checks flagged the fraud, making him ineligible for positions in warehouses, retail management, even delivery companies requiring clean credit. Each no seemed to chip away at his confidence, and yet, he never reached out. Mom and Michael's lives became strained too. Restitution payments stretched budgets thin, arguments over money and embarrassment escalating behind closed doors. Invitations from relatives stopped, polite excuses masking discomfort over the public courtroom drama. By summer, the family dynamic had shifted dramatically. Mom and Michael formally separated, selling their house to cover debts. Furniture, keepsakes, the tangible remnants of our blended life, they disappeared into garage sales or moved to strangers' homes. I heard the updates secondhand, from cousins at the grocery store or old neighbors at the coffee shop. My phone stayed silent, their numbers deleted months earlier, all old group texts erased. Boundaries finally felt like something real. One quiet Saturday in early fall, I drove to the old house for the last time. The for sale sign leaned slightly in the yard, leaves scattered across the driveway. The place felt hollow even before I stepped inside. Hallways echoed faintly, rooms stripped of personal touches, reminders of a life I had invested in yet was never truly part of. The clock still hung in its place, ticking steadily. I took it down carefully, wrapped it in a towel, carried it to my car. It felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, a fragment of childhood preserved amidst the chaos. Back at my apartment, I hung it on the center wall above the fireplace mantel. The crack in the glass caught light differently here, yet the hands moved with the same deliberate pace. Sitting with a mug of coffee one morning, listening to the tick-tock fill the room, it sounded like freedom rather than loss. This clock wasn't just a relic of the past, it was a statement. A reminder that roots exist, but chains don't. My choices, my boundaries, my sense of self, they were mine to protect. Weekends fell into a new rhythm. Long walks along the riverfront trail became meditative, watching the leaves turn, fall, and eventually make way for winter frost again. I discovered new cafes downtown, enjoying the quiet moments with a hot drink, occasionally letting the aroma of freshly baked bread or roasted coffee fill my senses. Reading on the balcony became a favorite ritual, letting the city hum quietly beneath me, isolated yet connected. Work recognition followed naturally. Promotions came not because I demanded them, but because consistency and diligence mattered. Responsibilities increased, and they felt earned, unlike the conditional respect I had sought from my family for so many years. Evenings alone weren't marked by guilt anymore. I chose them deliberately, not out of exclusion, but because they allowed me to exist fully in my space. Peace wasn't loud or dramatic, it was steady, like the tick of the reclaimed clock on my wall. Zane's opportunities shrank naturally, doors that were previously open through my inadvertent support now closed firmly. Mom's social circle contracted. Michael's fresh start became complicated with the division of assets, forcing him to navigate adulthood consequences without my intervention. They lived their lives, facing outcomes they had helped create, while I maintained my boundaries firmly. From this quieter vantage point, the lesson became clear. Respect, whether in blended families or any household, must flow both ways. Trust is the currency of relationships, and when it's exploited, repeatedly, it fractures what little foundation exists. I realized that endless forgiveness isn't always healthy, nor is forced reconciliation. Sometimes the healthiest, strongest choice is stepping away completely, no explanations owed, no backward glances, letting actions speak for themselves. The clock on my wall served as a daily reminder. Tick, tock, steady and unwavering, marking the passage of time without dictating how it should feel. My self-worth wasn't something to be negotiated or earned through sacrifice or appeasement. It was something to protect fiercely, without apology. Each morning, the sound of the hands moving was a small affirmation. I had reclaimed autonomy, restored my peace, and built a life that belonged to me alone. Sometimes, I reflected on the family I'd left behind. The house, the dinners, the carefully crafted holiday photos, they were symbols of an effort I had given fully, yet never reciprocated in emotional inclusion or acknowledgement. Every remodel, every small financial gesture, every compromise, it had been met with assumption, sometimes exploitation, never gratitude. But reflection no longer carried bitterness. It was merely recognition. Understanding that my responsibility didn't extend to correcting the missteps of others became liberating. I had feared isolation, but solitude proved grounding. I discovered joy in small things: Sunday mornings with fresh croissants, the sound of the river against its banks in early spring, workday accomplishments no one else noticed but me. Evenings with a novel, music softly playing, tea steaming in hand. Peace was quiet, but it was mine. It felt deliberate, chosen, and, most importantly, respected. The weeks became months. Snow returned in winter, soft and thick, blanketing Lansing in white again. I walked streets I knew intimately, greeted neighbors from a distance, shopped locally, maintained the apartment I had made my sanctuary. Work continued smoothly, with more responsibilities than before, but they were balanced with recognition and fair compensation. Life was steady, intentional, and, for the first time in years, entirely under my control. Looking back, I understood the arc of what had happened. The abuse of trust, the financial manipulation, the subtle emotional undermining, it wasn't about me personally. It was about control, convenience, and assumption of compliance from people who thought my kindness was weakness. Every act, small or large, had a ripple effect, and yet the culmination of consequences was inevitable. Legal resolution, boundaries enforced, and personal reclaiming of space and agency, they became natural, inevitable outcomes of actions taken by others. I had only stepped in to protect myself, and in doing so, found real peace. The clock's tick-tock accompanied each day, steady and unchanging. It reminded me of origins, yes, but also of freedom. I had retained what was truly mine: autonomy, dignity, and the ability to define my place in the world without compromise to anyone who would exploit me. The holiday photos, the dinners, the gestures of generosity, they existed in memory, but they no longer dictated my present. Life continued, deliberate, centered, and free. Months turned into seasons, each one marking a quiet evolution in my life. Lansing felt different now, though the streets, the river, and the familiar neighborhoods hadn't changed. I had changed. The apartment was a reflection of that, neat, purposeful, and full of things I chose because they brought me joy rather than duty. Small victories built momentum. A promotion at work came quietly, recognition for consistency and diligence. I handled more complex accounts, trained new staff, and occasionally consulted on special audits. Each success reinforced that my diligence, patience, and reliability were not just traits, but assets that deserved respect, and this respect was finally given without strings attached. Social interactions shifted, too. I had fewer people in my circle, but those remaining were chosen deliberately. Friendships weren't conditional, transactional, or dependent on my willingness to absorb the mistakes or debts of others. Weekends became opportunities to explore Lansing from a new perspective. I walked the river trails, noting small changes, the way the water level shifted with spring runoff, leaves turning brilliant shades of orange and red in fall, ducks lining up along the banks as winter approached. Cafes became familiar, comforting spaces. I sat with a book, watching life flow by, no one demanding my attention or loyalty beyond what I willingly offered. Despite the calm, remnants of the past lingered in ways that couldn't be ignored. Zane Larson's presence, though removed from my immediate life, continued to echo through updates I picked up passively. His reputation, tarnished by the court case and the fraud record, made him ineligible for many jobs he once thought attainable. Background checks flagged the issue for warehouses, retail chains, and even delivery companies. Each rejection felt like a testament to the consequences of repeated poor choices, compounded by the exploitation of trust. I didn't gloat. I simply observed the natural outcome of actions, understanding that my role had ended the moment I reclaimed my boundaries. Mom and Michael's lives unraveled quietly. The separation, previously smoothed over by appearances, became tangible through dwindling social connections and financial strain. Arguments that had once been whispered in corners escalated, their voices sometimes carrying thinly through the walls to neighbors who avoided eye contact during errands. The house that had been our shared stage for holidays was sold, the furniture dispersed, keepsakes lost to strangers. I never attended the moving sales. There was no need. The distance I had established wasn't punitive, it was protective. My absence reinforced the principle that my involvement in the mistakes of others had limits, and those limits were no longer negotiable. One morning, I found myself reflecting on the old dining room clock. The cracked glass and steady tick now symbolized more than my father's memory. It was freedom reclaimed. I traced my fingers along the wooden frame, polished just the way I liked it, and let the steady rhythm remind me that time moved forward, regardless of past betrayals. The clock's presence on my wall didn't demand attention, it quietly affirmed my autonomy, a constant in a world where so many other things had proven unreliable. Life didn't slow, but it became measured. I started journaling again, a practice I had abandoned in my teens. Writing allowed me to untangle thoughts, revisit old wounds with clarity, and reinforce the lessons learned. Each entry wasn't about vengeance or bitterness. It was about understanding patterns, acknowledging my role, and recognizing where trust had been exploited. The act of documenting helped me articulate boundaries I hadn't known I needed, and the consistency of this practice mirrored the steady tick of the clock on the wall. Work continued to be a grounding influence. Audits, client meetings, and ledger reconciliations offered structure, predictable challenges, and tangible outcomes. I took pride in mentoring younger staff, watching them grow in competence and confidence. Their respect felt earned, mutual, and devoid of the conditionality I had learned to spot early in my family. There was satisfaction in giving guidance without being drained, in helping others succeed without sacrificing my own security. It felt natural, sustainable, and fair. Evenings became a sacred space. I established rituals, tea in the kitchen while watching snowflakes drift past the window, reading on the balcony as dusk settled over the city, listening to music that reflected my moods rather than someone else's expectations. Each routine was deliberate, a reaffirmation of choice. Evenings alone were not empty, they were deliberate acts of self-respect, moments of reflection, and quiet victories of autonomy. Occasionally, memories of past generosity surfaced, not with guilt, but with understanding. The money lent, the favors granted, the emotional labor invested in a family that never fully recognized it, those were lessons, not failures. They shaped my ability to recognize manipulation, to enforce boundaries, and to protect myself. Every act of kindness from then on would be deliberate, conscious, and reciprocated in respect rather than assumed entitlement. Zane's missteps continued as news filtered through distant acquaintances. Jobs lost, opportunities denied, and financial consequences accrued. I felt no satisfaction, only the quiet affirmation that accountability, when neglected, creates natural consequences. There was no need to intervene, no need to correct, only the observation that outcomes align with choices. My own life moved forward because I had stopped absorbing responsibility for the recklessness of others. Mom, once a central figure in orchestrating harmony at the expense of fairness, had learned, albeit harshly. Financial obligations weighed heavily, social circles had contracted, and the reality of separation forced reflection. Michael faced similar strain. Their lives were being reshaped by the decisions they made and the repeated compromises that enabled exploitation. My choice to step away was reinforced daily as I watched their challenges unfold from a distance, untangled from my immediate involvement. Weekends were often spent walking the riverfront trails, a personal ritual of clarity. Observing the flow of the river reminded me of resilience and continuity. Life moved forward even when individual moments were tumultuous. Nature, in its steady rhythm, provided a template for the life I now led, structured, deliberate, and resilient. The quiet beauty of these walks, the sound of snow crunching under boots in winter, or leaves rustling in autumn, reinforced that peace is built gradually, consistently, and intentionally. Through all of this, the clock remained central. Tick, tock, steady and unwavering. It marked the passage of time, not dictated by the errors of others, but by the constancy of my own choices. The sound was a grounding presence in my apartment, a reminder that life could be steady and reliable if I maintained boundaries and protected my autonomy. The lessons of past betrayal were no longer painful triggers, they were markers, indicators of where diligence and careful discernment mattered most. By late fall, I began hosting small gatherings of friends, carefully curated, with boundaries clearly communicated. No assumptions, no uninvited demands, no hidden expectations. My home became a space of genuine connection rather than obligation. Laughter, conversation, and shared meals existed without the undercurrent of conditional respect. This was a new kind of family, chosen intentionally, grounded in mutual regard rather than entitlement. Reflecting on the past, I realized the significance of lessons learned. The financial manipulation, emotional undermining, and repeated breaches of trust weren't failures on my part. They were evidence of human behavior and patterns of entitlement I now understood intimately. My response, stepping back, enforcing boundaries, and reclaiming autonomy, was the most potent affirmation of self-worth I had ever exercised. The clock's tick continued, a reminder of stability amidst change. Each day reinforced that my choices, diligence, and self-respect were paramount. Respect from others could be earned and deserved, but it wasn't automatic. The path I had carved, deliberate and firm, allowed me to live without fear of exploitation, without needing to absorb the consequences of others' recklessness. Life settled into a rhythm that felt both earned and peaceful. Seasons shifted, snow melting into spring, leaves turning golden, and the river carrying reflections of the sky across its surface. My apartment became more than a space to live, it was a sanctuary. Every item, from books on shelves to plants in the window, was a conscious choice, a reflection of autonomy reclaimed. Even the clock, cracked glass and all, ticked steadily, no longer a reminder of loss, but a symbol of control and continuity. It was a sound I woke up to, a sound I returned to after long days, and a sound that grounded me in the certainty of my own life. Work remained a pillar of structure and purpose. Each day brought challenges and tasks that demanded attention, accuracy, and perseverance. I thrived in this environment, unburdened by familial interference, able to mentor colleagues, balance complex accounts, and see tangible results of my diligence. Recognition came naturally, quietly, without drama or the need to justify my contributions. Promotions followed, not as rewards for sacrifice, but for consistent, competent performance. The satisfaction was not superficial, it was real, earned, and deeply validating. The lessons of the past reverberated in my interactions with others. Friendships were deliberate, bonds were formed with those who respected boundaries and shared mutual care. The toxicity of conditional relationships no longer lingered. I had learned that being generous and reliable did not obligate me to tolerate exploitation. Each new connection reinforced the principle: respect is not assumed, it is earned and sustained through reciprocal action. Zane Larson faded from my daily consciousness, but the echoes of his actions served as ongoing reminders of boundaries maintained. He struggled visibly, opportunities diminished by the public record of fraud and the collateral consequences of financial recklessness. I did not revel in his misfortune, I simply acknowledged the inevitability of consequence when choices are made without regard for others. The distance I maintained protected me, and the natural course of events underscored the wisdom of stepping back. Mom and Michael's lives unfolded as a cautionary tale of blurred boundaries and misplaced priorities. The separation, though difficult, revealed the importance of personal accountability. Financial strain, social isolation, and the complications of dividing assets forced introspection and change, though not always successfully. Observing from a distance, I could see the consequences of decisions that had once implicated me, now contained entirely within their sphere. My absence, deliberate and protective, ensured that my future would not be compromised again. Weekends became sacred rituals. Walks along the riverfront trail, where sunlight danced across water in spring and snow muffled the city in winter, provided clarity and a tangible sense of peace. Cafes and small eateries became retreats where I could sit with a book or journal, reflecting on progress and observing life without intrusion. These quiet routines, chosen deliberately, were antidotes to years of conditional obligation. I had created a space where life's rhythms were predictable and restorative rather than draining or manipulative. Evenings were deliberate, anchored in comfort and personal choice. Tea brewed in the kitchen while snow drifted past the windows, books read on the balcony as the city lights flickered below, music that matched my mood rather than someone else's expectation. The solitude was intentional, restorative, and empowering. Being alone was no longer synonymous with loneliness, it was a conscious assertion of independence and well-being. Looking back, the weight of past generosity and the repeated exploitation of trust was reframed. The money lent, favors extended, and emotional labor invested were not failures, they were lessons. Each experience honed discernment, reinforced boundaries, and strengthened the ability to recognize manipulation. Generosity, moving forward, would be given freely but never at the cost of autonomy or self-protection. The past had been a teacher, not a chain. The old wall clock, once a symbol of what I had lost, now marked continuity and control. Its tick was a steady rhythm accompanying my life, a reminder that time advances and that stability comes from consistent choices, not from the unpredictable behavior of others. Its presence was a quiet affirmation of my autonomy, a reliable sound that transformed loss into reclamation. Hosting friends became intentional, curated experiences. Small gatherings, clearly bounded, replaced the conditional expectation of family obligations. Laughter, conversation, and shared meals existed without underlying tension. Trust and respect were fundamental, and the environment I cultivated reflected values of reciprocity and mutual regard. These gatherings were not acts of rebellion or vengeance, but celebrations of self-determined connection, a stark contrast to the family dynamics I had endured. Financial stability, carefully built and protected, allowed for growth and exploration. Savings, investments, and careful planning meant that opportunities could be pursued without fear of exploitation or hidden obligations. Credit, once threatened, was restored and safeguarded, providing security and freedom. The sense of empowerment, once deferred to accommodate others' recklessness, was fully realized. Through these months, I observed the outcomes for those who had once assumed entitlement. Zane's job prospects continued to diminish under the weight of documented fraud. Mom and Michael faced continued tension and financial challenges. Their lives reflected choices made and patterns reinforced over decades. My distance was not punitive, it was the natural separation that occurs when trust is violated and boundaries are finally enforced. Reflecting on the past brought clarity. Respect must be earned, not assumed. Generosity must be conscious, not coerced. Trust, once broken repeatedly, cannot be restored without acknowledgement and genuine accountability. The healthiest path in blended or any family is not endless forgiveness, but the assertion of self-protection and the freedom to disengage when patterns of exploitation persist. The clock, ticking steadily above the fireplace, became the auditory symbol of all these lessons. Its rhythm was comforting, consistent, and affirming. It marked moments of reflection, planning, and quiet triumph. It was a reminder that life, structured and respected, could be navigated on one's own terms. Looking back now, I see the subtle progression from naive patience to deliberate autonomy. Every act of kindness, every favor extended, every dollar lent, and every moment of emotional labor contributed to a deep understanding of boundaries, self-respect, and personal responsibility. These lessons were learned through experience, sometimes painful, but ultimately empowering. My life, now steady and self-directed, reflected choice rather than obligation. I had built a space where peace, respect, and autonomy were constants, and the echoes of past betrayal served only to reinforce the value of these principles. The future was mine to navigate, guided by lessons of accountability and the assurance that respect could never again be assumed, only earned. The quiet satisfaction of independence, the ability to control my environment, and the clarity of understanding boundaries brought real, lasting peace. It was not dramatic revenge, nor a public spectacle, but the natural consequence of deliberate action, careful observation, and steadfast self-protection. Those who had erred faced their own consequences, and the equilibrium restored itself without my further intervention. The clock's tick, steady and unwavering, filled my apartment with a sense of continuity and order. It reminded me that time advances, stability is cultivated, and autonomy is a right, not a privilege. It reminded me daily that self-worth is protected fiercely when necessary, and that the quiet, deliberate choices made over time yield the truest form of justice.